dropping, a state-of-the-art precision smart bomb exactly on its target. You blow a hostile weapons facility to absolute dust. Flawless victory. Right?
Yeah, that's the immediate assumption.
But then the dust settles, the satellite imagery clears up, and you realize you just accidentally lost 16 bombs worth of enriched uranium to the wind. You have no idea where it is.
And the people you just bombed are already moving it underground.
Exactly.
It's a terrifying scenario. And the scariest part is it's not some Hollywood script. This is the very real mathematical probability we are facing right now when we look at the current standoff with Iran.
Yeah.
We are dealing with a crisis that operates on a completely different set of mechanics than, anything we saw in the early 2000s.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. You, listening right now, have probably felt that heavy sense of global anxiety whenever the news flashes another headline about Middle Eastern escalation.
Oh, I mean, everyone feels it.
Totally. But today, we're going to shortcut that endless news cycle. We're digging deep into the research and the incredibly detailed war game simulations of Professor Robert Pape.
Right, who is a highly respected war strategist and expert on Iran simulations.
Yep, we're going to decode why this specific standoff is so dangerous. And it really all pivots on Pape's core thesis, which, honestly, this quote stopped me in my tracks. He says, "Bombs don't just hit targets, they change politics."
Yeah, that single sentence completely rewires how we need to evaluate military action.
It really does.
It forces us to stop looking at the immediate physical destruction like the crater in the ground and start analyzing the secondary and tertiary shockwaves that just ripple through a government and a society after the smoke clears.
Let me try to frame that, because I think the general public, myself included, we tend to treat modern warfare like a simple physics problem.
Right, kinetic force.
Exactly. You strike object A with a certain amount of force, and it falls down. Problem solved. You sweep up the pieces. But what Pape's simulations suggest is that striking a sovereign nation is actually, it's a highly complex chemistry experiment.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
Right. You strike object A, and it doesn't just fall down. It reacts. It mutates into something entirely new and incredibly volatile.
And the stakes of this particular chemistry experiment going wrong are almost impossible to overstate. I mean, we aren't just talking about distant military maneuvers in the desert.
Yeah.
We are talking about the potential reshaping of global power structures, a massive acceleration in nuclear proliferation. And on a really personal level for you listening, we're talking about the price of gas in your hometown doubling overnight.
Wow.
The ripple effects touch absolutely everything.
So let's look at the first stage of this chemical reaction going wrong. In the source material, Pape calls this the escalation trap. What does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, it begins with what the simulations call stage 1, which is tactical success versus strategic failure. Or, more simply, the smart bomb trap.
Okay, the smart bomb trap.
Yeah, because modern Western militaries are exceptionally good at precision. We can fly a drone from Nevada and drop a munition through the specific window of a specific facility halfway across the world.
Which is incredible.
It is. That is a tactical success. The building is gone. But here is the mechanism of the strategic failure. When you obliterate the facility, you destroy all the monitoring equipment, you destroy the containment protocols.
Oh, I see.
And crucially, a bomb does not vaporize heavy metals like uranium, it just scatters them.
Ah, so you hit the building, but you've essentially just created chaos that the regime can use to their advantage.
Precisely. Under the cover of that chaos, while the international community is busy assessing the strike, the regime quietly moves into the rubble. They retrieve the surviving canisters of enriched material, and they relocate them into deep, fortified mountain tunnels. The terrifying statistic from Pape's analysis is that directly because of these types of strikes, 16 bombs worth of enriched uranium has essentially disappeared from our radar.
Wait, 16 bombs worth?
Yes. We simply do not know where it is anymore.
That is deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
We hit the target, but we just dispersed the threat and made it invisible.
Exactly.
Which naturally sets up stage 2. The sources refer to this as the Jenga fallacy. And this is where we get into the whole idea of the regime change and decapitation strikes.
Yeah. The Jenga fallacy is a very persistent myth in Western military doctrine. It's this assumption that a hostile authoritarian regime is built exactly like a game of Jenga.
Meaning if you pull the right block out.
Right. Usually the top leader, the general, or the Ayatollah. You pull that block out with a targeted assassination, and the entire tower will just collapse into a pile of dust.
And then magically a friendly pro-Western democracy just sprouts from the ruins.
That's the fantasy, yeah.
I have to admit, I've fallen for that logic myself. Like, I've always kind of pushed back on the criticism of taking out hostile leaders. If you have a massive toxic weed choking out your garden, your first instinct is to chop the head off. So why wouldn't a targeted strike, removing the most dangerous player from the board, be a net positive for global security?
Well, because in this specific political ecosystem, killing a leader doesn't kill the weed. It actually acts like high-grade fertilizer for a much more aggressive root system.
Wow.
The reality of decapitation strikes, which Pape simulations demonstrate time and time again, is that assassinating a leader actually makes the regime harder, more unified, and far more resilient.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. How does killing the guy in charge make the country stronger?
You have to look at the internal politics. Often, the established leaders at the top of these regimes, even the ones who shout death to America on television, they actually act as internal guardrails.
Guardrails.
Yeah. They are wealthy, they're entrenched in power, and they have a massive vested interest in their own survival and maintaining the status quo. They know exactly where the red lines are, and they know not to cross them.
Okay, that makes sense.
But when you assassinate that guardrail leader, you immediately create a power vacuum.
And I'm guessing the people who fill that vacuum aren't moderate diplomats.
Never. The vacuum is almost exclusively filled by younger, highly aggressive, revolutionary guard types of successors.
Right.
These are individuals who feel they have to prove their strength to the military, and they have this mandate to avenge their predecessor. So you didn't solve the problem at all. You just replaced a cautious, calculating adversary with a radicalized fanatic who feels they have absolutely nothing to lose.
Okay, so the chemistry experiment mutates again. We strike the regime, the guardrails come off, and now we're dealing with a younger, aggressive leadership.
Exactly.
And the source material highlights that this new leadership doesn't just fight back with standard armies, they shift to what the military calls horizontal escalation.
Yes, because they know they cannot beat a combined Western coalition in a traditional tank-to-tank battle. It would be suicide.
Right, it's totally asymmetrical.
So they escalate horizontally, meaning they expand the conflict into new domains. Instead of fighting our military, they fight our economy.
Give me a concrete example of how they do that. Like, what does economic warfare actually look like in this scenario?
It looks like deploying fleets of cheap, highly effective drones, and not necessarily to hit military bases, but to terrorize global infrastructure.
Oh, wow.
They actively target commercial shipping and oil tankers in the Persian Gulf. They threaten civilian tourism hubs in neighboring countries like the UAE. It's all designed to break the political will of Western coalitions. They essentially hold global commerce hostage.
Geez, if we synthesize this, the picture is incredibly bleak. I mean, airstrikes scatter 16 bombs worth of uranium into unknown mountain bunkers. Assassinating leaders radicalizes the government into launching global economic warfare.
Yeah.
We're boxing ourselves into a corner where our own tactics are just making the situation worse. Which leads us to stage 3 of Pape's simulations. How do we actually try to solve the mess we just made?
Well, stage 3 is the move to ground deployment. And the mathematical probability here is chilling. According to Pape's war games, if this escalation trap continues to unfold, there is a 75% chance that the conflict will require boots on the ground.
Wait, 75%?
Yes.
That isn't a fringe possibility, that's a statistical likelihood.
Yeah.
But why is a ground invasion so inevitable if we have all these advanced drones and aircraft?
It goes right back to the smart bomb trap. You have 16 bombs worth of missing nuclear material buried under hundreds of feet of granite.
Oh, right.
You cannot find hidden, scattered uranium from 30,000 feet in the air. Satellites can't see through mountains. So at a certain point, airstrikes become completely useless. The only operational way to locate, secure, and extract that material before it's assembled into a warhead is to physically send human beings with radiation detectors into the country. A massive ground deployment becomes a tactical necessity.
And it's safe to assume a newly radicalized Iranian leadership isn't just going to roll out the red carpet while foreign troops search their sovereign territory.
Absolutely not. A ground invasion triggers what the war games call Operation Jihad. It's a direct, asymmetrical, retaliatory strategy. The goal isn't just to fight the troops in the desert. The goal is to bring the consequences of the conflict directly to the Western homeland.
Seriously?
Yeah. They activate sleeper cells and proxy networks to ensure that the invading populations feel the pain, the fear, and the economic cost of the war on their own streets, which rapidly fractures domestic support for the entire campaign.
I want to pause and look at the psychological shift behind all of this, because I think this is where the dynamic gets truly fascinating. If we look at the nuclear dilemma, by systematically targeting and killing Iranian leadership and crippling their economy with sanctions, the West has fundamentally warped Iran's incentive structure.
We have inverted it entirely. And this is perhaps the most critical, counterintuitive insight from Pape's entire body of work.
Okay.
For decades, the West relied on the threat of overwhelming force to keep Iran from building a bomb. The unspoken agreement was, if you build it, we will destroy you.
Right. Deterrence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But once you start actively executing their leaders and destroying their infrastructure anyway, you completely remove their primary incentive not to build the weapon.
I see. Because if they believe they are going to be attacked and assassinated, regardless of whether they have a nuclear weapon or not, the logical conclusion is they might as well have one to defend themselves.
Exactly. From the perspective of a radicalized leadership, crossing the nuclear threshold transitions from being a risk to being the only mathematical guarantee of their own survival.
Wow.
Which brings us to a specific strategy Pape refers to as the North Korea plan.
Right. The sources mention the North Korea plan.
Yeah.
What are the actual mechanics of that playbook for a country like Iran?
It's a method of achieving absolute, undeniable deterrence. The North Korea plan dictates that a nation quietly builds not just one, but a small arsenal of nuclear devices in secret.
It's okay.
Then, crucially, they conduct an undeniable mountain test. They take one of those devices, place it deep underground in a mountain facility, and detonate it.
And that creates a seismic event.
A massive seismic shockwave that every geological monitoring station on the entire planet can measure and verify. They don't just say they have a bomb, they prove their capability unequivocally to the world. And once they do that, just as North Korea did, they achieve absolute diplomatic and military immunity. Once a nation proves it has a functional nuclear arsenal, you can no longer threaten regime change without risking global nuclear annihilation. The geopolitical calculus just freezes.
But surely we would see them building this arsenal, right? I mean, I was reading through the sources, comparing our intelligence capabilities from a decade ago to what we have today, and the contrast is just stark. During the Obama-era nuclear deal, we supposedly had 247 high-definition monitoring of their facilities.
We did. The 2015 agreement gave international inspectors unprecedented physical access. We had cameras on the centrifuges. We knew exactly how much uranium was being enriched, to what percentage, and where it was going.
So what happened?
That architecture has been systematically dismantled. Pape describes our current intelligence capabilities in Iran as Swiss cheese.
Swiss cheese.
Yeah. The monitoring cameras have been ripped out or blinded. International inspectors are routinely denied access to key sites. We are trying to track a highly sophisticated, dispersed, underground nuclear development program while suffering from massive, debilitating blind spots.
Let me summarize this because it is a lot to take in. Our intelligence is full of holes. We've actively incentivized a radicalized younger leadership to build a bomb just to guarantee their own survival.
Yes.
And if they get close, there's a 75% chance we'll have to send American ground troops into a hostile country to find missing uranium. We are basically flying blind into a nuclear hurricane.
We are. But it gets even more complicated.
Of course it does.
Because Iran's reaction to all of this is only half the board. We aren't flying into this hurricane in a vacuum. When the United States turns its entire focus and military apparatus toward finding uranium in the Middle East, the rest of the global chessboard, specifically other major superpowers, take full advantage of the distraction.
Which brings us directly to Russia and China. Because they're not just sitting back and eating popcorn while this escalation trap unfolds, they're actively manipulating the situation.
Absolutely.
Let's start with Russia. The sources indicate that Moscow is currently providing advanced satellite-level targeting intelligence directly to Iran. Why wouldn't they do that? Just to sow chaos?
No, it's highly calculated statecraft. It is a direct tit-for-tat retaliation.
Okay.
For years now, the West, led heavily by the U.S., has been supplying Ukraine with the advanced intelligence and weaponry required to effectively fight and kill Russian soldiers. So, from Moscow's perspective, providing Iran with the capability to accurately target Western military bases or commercial assets in the Middle East is simply returning the favor.
Wow.
It forces the West to bleed resources on two fronts simultaneously, splitting their focus and draining their treasuries.
And then we look at China. Pape's analysis describes a potential U.S.-Iran conflict as absolute manna from heaven for Beijing.
It is the ultimate geopolitical gift. If the United States gets bogged down in yet another forever war in the Middle East, spending trillions of dollars, deploying hundreds of thousands of troops, and exhausting its military readiness for the next decade, China wins by default.
Because we're totally distracted.
Exactly. They get to thrive economically, secure global supply chains, and expand their regional influence in the South China Sea without firing a single shot. They win simply because their primary rival is pinned down, bleeding out on the other side of the world.
The sources really highlighted this macroeconomic contrast, what they called a hegemonic shift, the idea of global superpower status changing hands.
Right.
They pointed out the explosive rise of Chinese infrastructure. You look at the massive futuristic development in places like Wuhan and Shenzhen, the high-speed rail networks being built in record time, and you contrast that with the ongoing narrative of American industrial decline, aging bridges, failing power grids.
It perfectly illustrates the difference between a nation investing its capital into domestic growth and modernization versus a nation pouring its capital into overseas kinetic conflicts.
It's like watching two people lock themselves in a vicious, bloody feud over a property line, spending all their money on lawyers and security cameras.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the neighbor across the street is quietly buying up the rest of the block, building a mansion, and securing their family's future for the next century.
That is a very accurate way to look at it. And the tragedy is, while foreign powers are building those mansions, the fallout of that neighborhood feud hits the American public directly.
Which is the perfect pivot to the domestic consequences of this entire geopolitical chess match. Now, before we get into the U.S. political landscape, I want to take a very quick pause, just to be super clear with you listening right now.
Right, because American politics can be a minefield.
Exactly. We all know that American politics is incredibly polarized.
Yeah.
So I want to state explicitly, neither of us are taking political sides here. We're not endorsing any viewpoints, we're not advocating for any candidates, and we're not aligning with any parties.
Absolutely not.
We are strictly neutrally laying out Professor Pape's strategic analysis of how the mechanics of domestic politics intersect with this international crisis.
And if we look at it purely analytically, the connection between global geopolitics and your personal bank account is immediate.
Yes.
When we talk about horizontal escalation and economic warfare in the Strait of Hormuz, we aren't talking about abstract stock market futures. We are talking about basic affordability.
Right, because the Strait of Hormuz is a massive global choke point. A huge percentage of the world's oil flows through that one narrow body of water.
Exactly. So if Iran uses asymmetrical warfare deploying cheap naval mines or drone swarms to harass commercial shipping in that strait, the global insurance premiums for those oil tankers skyrocket overnight.
Makes sense.
Ships have to reroute or halt entirely. Global gas prices spike. And that immediately triggers domestic inflation in the United States. Suddenly, the cost of transporting food goes up, which means this Middle Eastern conflict directly dictates what you pay at the grocery store and the gas pump.
And economic pain at the pump inevitably shapes the American presidency. Pape's profiling of the executive branch in this crisis is fascinating, particularly his analysis of the psychology of leadership. He details something called the legacy trap, specifically using Donald Trump as an analytical model.
Yeah, the legacy trap is a critical vulnerability in high-stakes statecraft. Pape's analysis suggests that an administration driven heavily by a desire for a Nobel-level legacy like a historic, unprecedented geopolitical win can actually become a prisoner to that ambition.
How does wanting a massive historic win turn into a trap?
Because in international relations, strategies fail all the time. When a strategy starts failing, the rational, safe move is to cut your losses, pivot, and find an exit strategy. But if a leader's entire political brand and ego are wrapped up in achieving a historic victory, admitting defeat is psychologically and politically unacceptable. So instead of cutting their losses, the administration doubles down on the failing strategy.
Oh, wow.
They pour more troops, more money, and more aggression into a situation that is already spiraling out of control, hoping to brute force a win.
Which ties into another concept Pape brings up regarding modern leadership, the chaos kid theory.
Yes. The Chaos Kid theory describes a modern political strategy of navigating delicate international relations using a media storm mindset.
Okay.
It is statecraft by 24-hour news cycle. It relies on unpredictability, sudden aggressive social media statements, and dominating the daily headlines to keep adversaries off balance.
But I have to ask, does a strategy built for winning a 24-hour news cycle actually function when you are negotiating with a nation that is executing a 10-year underground North Korea plan for nuclear immunity.
Honestly,
No. It feels like trying to win a game of chess by loudly banging on the table. Like you might get everyone's attention, but you aren't actually moving any pieces.
we've hit on the fundamental mismatch. Media chaos might successfully win a domestic news cycle, but it does absolutely nothing to dismantle a dispersed, underground nuclear program.
Right.
In fact, that kind of erratic unpredictability often accelerates the adversary's timeline. If they feel they cannot trust any diplomatic agreements because the policy changes every time there's a new headline, their only logical move is to build the bomb faster.
Wow. So let's pull all of this together. We've traced the volatile chemistry of this crisis from a single precision smart bomb all the way to a potential 75% chance of a ground war, skyrocketing grocery prices, and a massive shift in global superpower hegemony. Where does Pape see this ultimately heading?
He brings all of these threads together for a very sobering final conclusion. According to his analysis, the ultimate threat to American primacy isn't actually Iran's nuclear program, it isn't Russia's intelligence sharing, and it isn't China's economic rise.
Then what is the ultimate threat?
It is the internal normalization of political violence within the United States itself.
We are our own worst enemies.
Precisely. If a nation is fundamentally fractured at home, if it is unable to maintain domestic stability, pass basic budgets, or agree on the fundamental norms of democracy, it cannot successfully project strength abroad.
That makes a lot of sense.
It cannot execute the complex, multi-decade statecraft required to navigate a nuclear crisis. The decay of the domestic foundation is the real existential threat that allows everything else to unravel.
Yeah, it is heavy. But the deep dive doesn't end there. Pape offers some closing advice for our leadership that honestly feels completely counterintuitive to everything we are taught about taking decisive action.
He does, and his advice centers on having the courage to kick the can down the road.
Which is wild because in domestic politics, kicking the can is the ultimate insult.
Oh, absolutely.
If you accuse a leader of kicking the can down the road, you're calling them a coward. You're saying they're too weak or incompetent to solve the problem today.
In domestic policy, that might be true. But in the realm of global nuclear-adjacent warfare, Pape argues that intentionally delaying conflict for 10 or 20 years is often the most courageous, effective, and mature strategic choice a leader can make.
Because it buys time for the chemistry to change.
Exactly. It avoids that 75% probability of a catastrophic ground war. It avoids forcing the adversary into a corner where they have to execute the North Korea plan.
Right.
A 20-year delay allows time for hostile regimes to age and change naturally. It allows new defensive technologies to emerge, and it allows diplomatic avenues to slowly open up that simply do not exist in the white-hot heat of an immediate crisis.
It really highlights the absolute necessity of finding what Pape calls a golden off-ramp,
Yes.
a diplomatic way to de-escalate that allows both sides to save face, claim a minor victory, and step back from the brink, avoiding the disastrous fate of previous administrations that got trapped in those unwinnable forever wars.
Sometimes the bravest thing a commander-in-chief can do is to actively choose not to fight today, so that the nation has the strength and the resources to survive tomorrow.
Bombs don't just hit targets, they change politics. We started this deep dive with that single idea that warfare isn't a simple physics problem where you knock a block down and sweep it up.
Far from it.
It is a volatile, unpredictable chemistry experiment. And sometimes, the more kinetic force we apply, the more we mutate the very problem we are trying to solve.
Couldn't agree more.
So I want to leave you with a lingering question, something to mull over long after this audio stops playing. If, as Professor Pape suggests, kicking the can down the road is actually the bravest and most effective strategy in global warfare, if delaying action is actually the smart play globally, where else in our own lives or our society are we demanding immediate destructive action to solve a complex problem when patience, delay, and simply letting the chemistry settle are actually the true signs of wisdom?
It's a question we all desperately need to answer.